Welcome to Insights at Questrom and our fascinating discussion today on harnessing the power of generative AI, what every executive should be asking right now. I'm Lisa Rohrer, and I'm a professor of the practice and the executive director of the Lifelong Learning program here at Boston University's Questrom School of Business. I'm excited to be bringing together this amazing group of academic and industry thinkers for what I'm sure will be a very lively and interactive discussion on this very important topic. With me today are three experts in the field of AI who will help us with the pressing question of how business leaders can and should be using generative AI in their companies today to drive productivity, efficiency, revenue, and profitability. So I'm going to ask each of you to give a very brief 2-minute introduction. First of all, we have DK Lee, who is the Kelli Questrom Associate Professor in Management Information Systems. DK, want to give a short introduction?
Yes, hello. My name is DK, Dokyun Lee. People call me DK, so I'm an associate professor at Questrom School as well as CDS. And my research area involves studying the responsible application, development, and impact of AI in digital consumer in e-commerce, analytics with focus on text, and these days multimodal as well. So I look at the frictions and solutions when applying AI in business, often human-AI collaboration focus. And I'll be talking about one of the research here.
Great. Our second panelist today is Jimmy Hexter, who is the Philip Van Horn Gerdine Professor in Global Business, as well as the co-founder of GAI Insights. Jimmy?
Thanks, Lisa. So again, my name is Jimmy, along with Paul Baier. I co-founded GAI Insights, and we're a firm that focuses on helping businesses and executives get the most out of and the greatest insights from generative AI today to drive business performance. At Boston University's Business School, I'm a professor of the practice and I focus on global business and strategy. And prior to this, I was at McKinsey & Company for 25 years, focusing on global business, much of it in Asia. And after that, spent 10 years as a private equity investor, focusing on consumer businesses, broadly speaking. And I'm really delighted to be here. It's a very interesting topic, and we're excited for all of your questions.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy. And we have, as our third panelist, Paul Baier, who, as Jimmy noted, is co-founder and CEO of GAI Insights, and is also former leader of several VC-backed software companies. Paul, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Excited you're here. You're part of the vanguard that's learning about this transformative technology. My background is 25 years in enterprise software, so I've seen a lot of tech waves. This is as transformative as the internet, and we're working with companies on how to use this in a very practical way, and we'll share some of that today.
So I'm going to ask DK to set up to kind of get us started here in the discussion. DK, what is Gen AI, and how is it different from AI? Because we knew about AI, but now suddenly people are talking about Gen AI. Can you talk a little bit about what is this?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify that Gen AI did exist, not to this extent. So simply speaking, Gen AI is a set of algorithms that models data generating process, right? As opposed to discriminative models, that's more like regression and classification that we are aware of. Right. So, and these days, in the last year or two, it has exploded, and public interest has just increased a lot. And that's due to the conversational AI, right? So conversational AI like ChatGPT, Bard, and so on and so forth. And that is a modern sort of generative AI machine learning algorithm that learns by both looking at examples and also fine-tuning or changing some behavior based on human feedback, right? So, and I just want to, one message I want to say here is that generative AI is just, it has been there. It's nothing special other than the scale and the performance has increased up to the point where it's transformative. right? So the ChatGPT and these, the chatbots or text-to-image models, all these generative model, I would say it's very powerful and transformative, but it's just one aspect of generative AI. And I want to impart this message that generative AI can be useful for understanding landscape of any multimodal business object. I'll talk about that later. Right. So I think everybody is aware of these large language models based on the survey. And future of landscape of generative AI is that these big companies and companies with large amount of resources would be creating the layman AI or foundational models, right? And you as a user would be imparting that, would be training that further to create sort of an expert AI, right? System with the proprietary data and know-how, right? So that's the landscape that we go from now on. Lastly, I just want to mention that there is a lot of mistake about and misconception or misinformation about the current state of AI and generative AI is that it's the mistake you can make, the biggest mistake you can make is projecting the view of human intelligence on AI. It's totally different, right? So what is easy for us may not be easy for AI, what may be, and vice versa, right? So one rule of thumb when asking, what is possible and what is not possible with AI is there enough good training data, high quality training data? And if there are a good amount of training data, then the AI system that we have now will have a good semblance of knowledge. And then you run into other problems like hallucination, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay, great. Jimmy, anything you would add in terms of just kind of setting up what Gen AI is, how it's different, and why it's important?
Yeah, so as DK said, and with AI and to some degree generative AI in limited form has been available, up till now. So a lot of people are saying, but all of a sudden it kind of stormed the scene in November, and it's all everyone is talking about it now. What happened and why is it different? And so again, to build on DK's points, this simultaneous explosion in computing power and storage at the same time allowed this incredible processing capability. And what it really meant is two things became possible at the same time. One is all of a sudden we don't need experts to quote unquote program our computers. We can just talk to it in human language. So all of us, and it was clear from that all of us basically have used ChatGPT. We know that all of a sudden we can just use human language to talk to and get a response with and actually have a dialogue with our computers, which we could never do before. And the second thing that happens is it can be applied, a single model can be applied across multiple applications. So instead of having just vertical applications where you have a specialized, discrete model that needs an expert to do it, you have this single model that anyone can use in their own language for almost any application. So the way we think about it is all of a sudden, it's like we moved from the steam engine to electricity. So steam was like in the basement in a dirty boiler room. Only certain people would go down there and make it work, and it could only have a narrow set of applications, like a train or something. Now all of a sudden we have electricity. And sure, only a certain number of people know how to build a power plant, like only a certain number of people know how to build a large language model. But all the rest of us need to do to use electricity is flick a switch in our room. And all we need to do with ChatGPT is use our own language to ask it to do something. And that's why it's taken us by storm and why we're having this conversation. Because generative AI has allowed AI to go from the domain of the experts in specific applications to all of us using our own language to use it anywhere. And as we think about business, what that means is all of us in our businesses, in all of the disciplines, functions, tasks, and processes have the opportunity to think about where to apply it. And that's both exciting because the opportunity is huge, and frightening because it has a lot of implications we don't understand, and we need to know how to manage the risk while we figure out how to take advantage of the opportunity.
Fantastic. Paul, anything to add in terms of the setup here?
Yeah, I think one common thing we hear a lot is we've seen these tech waves. We've seen metaverse, we've seen crypto, we went through blockchain. This is just another one of them. And I think there's a couple key differences to highlight. All of those were infrastructure. This is something that everybody can use with very low cost or zero cost to use. That's one point. The second one is all those were new technologies where the benefits were in the future. It was anticipatory that the benefits. This is the exact opposite. People are getting benefits today with no training. And even in early days of the internet, we did not see strikes and unionizations and market caps being cut in half like we have already this year because of Gen AI. So it is different not only in the benefits that people are adopting, it's also different in how quickly the business impact is being felt by some organizations out there.
Right. That leads well into my next question. Jimmy, when you think about the business implications, how urgent and important is Gen AI to business?
Yep.
And how do you think leaders should go about thinking about this, getting their arms around what this means for their business?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Lisa. And I think that the survey that we saw at the beginning begins to hint at the answer to that, which is all of us are using it to a degree. And I mean, some more or less than others, but we're all aware of it. All of the people in our organizations are talking about it. And it's become a really important part of what we do. So what we want to look at here today is not, most of the society, let me put it this way, most of this is the kind of dialogue in the press is about societal and economic implications. They're all important. They talk about accuracy bias, China, existential threat to humanity, and those are important, and we have to solve them, unquestionably. The way we think about it at GI Insights is if you look at generative AI through bifocal lenses, that's what you see when you look through the top half of the bifocal lenses. But what we as business leaders also need to do is look through the bottom half of the bifocal lenses. And what you see through the bottom half of the bifocal lenses is what's coming at you now. It's what's up close and up front. And so what we want to think about is what could you do in your business and your industry literally in the next 2 to 6 quarters by the end of 2024. And so some of the stuff we're going to talk about now is based in part on a 3,000 person user group that we have. And we talk to regularly about what they're seeing, what they're facing. We'll draw on the survey we just had. And we've developed a framework based on all of those dialogues that we call wins. And if we could get the first framework up on the board, it'll help describe why we think this is so important. The way we tend to think about generative AI, most people talk in the public about knowledge workers. They talk about, oh, generative AI is going to affect knowledge workers. But our thoughts are, well, a heart surgeon is a knowledge worker, and a chef is a knowledge worker, and lots of other people are knowledge workers. But we need to be more specific about the people and processes that are going to be affected by generative AI to see why it's urgent and how it's going to make a difference. And so to think about that, we think about the acronym WINS, which stands for words, images, numbers, and sounds. And the point that we make is that any task, process, function, overall company where the work that happens has a significant amount of the cost and time absorbed by work that's done and work where it involves the manipulation of words, images, numbers, and sounds, that's where the impact is going to be. And the more it is, the higher it is. And then the second thing to keep in mind is the more that is digitized today, the faster it's going to happen. So if we look at this framework here, what you can see is on the horizontal axis, we think about industries where the percentage of the cost base, and we'll add in the amount of the time of processes, are based in wins work from low to high. And on the vertical axis, we think about how much that's digitized today. And if you have a business where a lot of your work is based on wins and it's digitized today, we say you're in the crucible. This is coming at you today. And companies in those industries will be radically transformed over the next 3 to 5 years. If you're in the upper left-hand corner, where there's a lower percentage in the cost base and time spent on wins work, but the level of digitization of that wins work is already high, while there may not be the same massive transformation, we say you're holding a lever. Because the key value-added functions, processes, and sub-processes, where the wins work is prevalent, they will be significantly changed. And so the opportunity to deliver differently and better certain parts of your business to alter the customer experience or the cost structure is still significant. So if we go to the second slide for just a moment, we can give some specific examples of what we see in those industries. So in the upper right-hand corner, in the crucible, you see companies like entertainment, software, professional services, financial service, and education. And let's kind of zoom in on those for a minute. Entertainment, I mean, that's in the media today, all day, every day. The strike in California of the writers is in no small part due to the impact they're seeing of generative AI, because they're already feeling the pressure both from the writers on the writing of scripts and on the actors or the creation of characters that is being replaced with generative AI. So it's happening today. In fact, the whole Marvel team went on strike because they're worried about this. In software, people estimate that up to 30% of all code is already being written in some fashion by generative AI. And if you continue to go down the list here, it's taking place today. If you go to the upper left-hand corner, what you see are industries where the end product tends to not be a digital end product. It's a physical end product, but a number of the processes along the way are heavily digitally oriented and wins oriented. And so their ability to change the way they do business to deliver the physical product and the cost structure to get there, or the ultimate customer experience, is still highly impacted by wins work and ultimately will be impacted imminently by generative AI.
Jimmy,
Okay.
if I can interrupt you for just one quick
please.
second.
And let's take we can take the framework down.
Okay, because we had one person asking to clarify, or just to clarify again, what is wins work? I know you said it, but if you can just reiterate that, because I know that's key to your framework.
Sure. So, and it's a great question. So WINS stands for words, images, numbers, and sounds. And the idea is that anything that happens in a company, whether it's an individual task, whether it's, so let's say the process of writing a press release, very word intensive, right? Or the artwork that might go in a magazine ad, very image intensive, right? Maybe it's an end-to-end process. Writing code, again, it's very WINS intensive. It's, in this case, it's numbers and words. It's a binary process, right? Words, images, numbers, and sounds. It could be the creation of the voice track for something. And there are already companies like Flawless AI that are revolutionizing the way voice tracks for dubbing are done for movies, and dramatically improving the time and reducing the cost. So all of that is the places where generative AI will have an impact. And one of the ways to think about that is we all became aware of generative AI because of ChatGPT, which is a text-to-text generative AI model. We type in text, we get back text. But the full kind of panoply of generative AI tools deals across all of these. So you have text to video, you have text to sound, you have sound to video, et cetera, et cetera. And so we think that the idea of large language models is not quite right. And so GK used the phrase, multimodal. We like to think it's not LLMs, large language models, but it's LMMs, large media models, because it's across all different media. So just to recap, and then we can move on. As you think about how this is affecting your business, and you look through the business kind of top to bottom, back to front, and you say to your direct reports and your department heads, the way I want you all to think about this is, where in your business are the places where we're most affected by tasks and functions and processes that are driven by the manipulation of words, images, numbers, and sounds, and that's where the impact's going to be.
Fantastic. Thank you.
To whoever asked that great question, if I didn't quite answer it, please ask for a clarification.
Great. I think that was helpful, just to double down a little bit on that.
No, I appreciate that.
One of the big questions is around skills and talent, and what kinds of skills and talent are required to really capitalize on this?
Yeah.
Is this a doubling down on your tech team? What does it look like from a skills perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. And I'm going to ask Paul to come in on this also with me, because we spent a lot of time talking about this. But as we think about talent, I think there's a couple of ways to think about it. First of all, there's clearly a technical aspect to it, the building of the technology. But again, what's unique about this is that its applications and ability to use it is quite ubiquitous. So our view is that it's really not something that you want to kind of call a tech problem. It's a business problem. It would be like saying that kind of the internet is a tech thing. And so we'll leave that to IT. You wouldn't have anybody in your business not know how to use the internet or know how to use Word or Excel. It's a business tool that everyone needs to know how to use. So number one, everyone in the company should know how to use it. It's coming, right? You wouldn't hire anybody who works with numbers to not know how to use Excel. You wouldn't have anybody write a document for you who doesn't use Word. Everybody's going to be using ChatGPT. Moderna, the biotech company, is requiring all of their employees to be Gen AI fluent because they know it's coming. And the second thing we believe about it is it's a bit like swimming. You can't learn generative AI, you can't learn ChatGPT by watching a video and then thinking you know how to do it. Just like you can't, watch a movie or listen to a lecture about swimming and then think you know how to swim. There's only one way to do this, and you got to do it. And it starts at the top, right? Everyone has to know how to do this. So the third thing we would say, Lisa, is from a skills, talent, and capability question, this is an everybody question. And the CEO is going to need and want to know how to use this both to make their lives more efficient and because they're going to have to understand its implications to make important decisions for the company and their team, and so on and so on. So I think those are the important things to know. And we could certainly dive into the specific skills and capabilities, but most importantly, create an environment where everybody needs to know how to learn the skill and learn it quickly because it's coming at you fast.
Fantastic. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Now, I would just quickly add, we see the skill shortage as the imperative on the business challenge in the next 3 to 4 years. I think figuratively 100 feet of technical AI capability today, we might understand 5%. This thing's grown so much. Next year, it's going to be 300 feet high, and we might only understand 15%. So all the best talent in your organization already knows that Gen AI is the biggest career accelerant ever. And they are going to stay in your organization, or they're going to go across the street and be able to get the organizations, as Jimmy says, to have a good place to learn this. That's one. Second big point is that the scarcity right now is applying it. What's the overlap of capability and the company's use cases that drive the biggest benefit? And who does that well will be the leaders, and who doesn't do that well will be the laggers in your industry.
Lisa, if I'm guessing right, your next question should be about risk, because that would be my next question. Everybody in my organization is going to use this. And we saw earlier that people were worried about IP, people were worried about security, people were worried about hallucination. Okay, Jimmy and Paul just said, everybody's got to learn this, but wait a minute, my organization is going to be at risk. What do I do about that? So the way we think about this is, and it's the right mindset in our opinion, is you need to protect the enterprise while learning and innovating. So how would you do that? Let's think about the options. On the one hand, you could just shut it down. And some organizations have done that. No generative AI, not going to happen in our, no ChatGPT, it's too risky. The problem is everybody's going to use it anyway. They're going to use it at home, they're going to use it on their computer, or they're going to go somewhere where they can use it. So that doesn't work. On the other end, you just kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom. Well, that doesn't work because there is real risk, right? We all know stories about people putting their corporate information up into ChatGPT and all of a sudden it becomes public. We know about people using hallucinated information without checking it, and it becomes a liability. So the middle ground is really, in our opinion, the way to do it, which is to create walled gardens. So the first thing is you have to have rules and they have to be enforced. It's just like any risk to the company where it's serious. We want people to do what they need to do, but we also need to know that if they violate it, they're putting the company at risk and there are consequences. The second thing we would say is it's top down and bottom up. So bottom up, we want lots of experimentation, controlled experimentation within a walled garden around three things. So this implications are going to come in terms of customer experience, the company, which is really the cost structure and the processes, and colleagues. How can this be used to improve the team experience and the colleague experience? So let's run controlled experiments there to learn more about how we can drive performance in the company, while at the same time doing a top-down strategic review. Because if you're in the crucible and you're not thinking about what this industry and your company is going to look like in 3 years after ChatGPT has kind of transformed the industry, somebody's going to come and do that in front of you and leave you behind. So that's how we think about encouraging the innovation, getting everybody to learn while except managing risk.
Great. DK, I know you've done a lot of thinking about risk around these technologies. Would you have anything to add there?
Let me just first share the slide. It's a nice segue into what Jimmy was talking about. So I think the first thing I want to mention is that everybody, well, yeah, this is here to stay, and there's an awful lot of misinformation about this technology. And I would encourage everyone to actually learn the basics of how these things work, because this will give you some sort of guidance on, what to do and what not to do, right? So just to give you an example of in the AI, when deep learning started getting popularized due to ImageNet paper in 2010, all the companies started using it blindly, right? But the problem is deep learning is not so interpretable. And after a few years, people started realizing, oh, wait, we don't know when this works. When it doesn't work, the reliability is an issue. We need to understand why it's making its prediction, right? So then interpretable machine learning started coming out a few years later. So the lesson of the story there is that there's always a friction between humans adopting AI or technology to do, some business or solve some problems. And so here are some biggest top issues preventing companies from deploying generative AI these days. The first thing is, it can misrepresent facts and hallucinate, right? So even there's studies that show that even when you carefully curate data sets such that they are all factual, just the way the generative, these tools work, it can still hallucinate. And we don't know, that's not a solved problem yet, right? So there's a huge issue because these models learn from data set. If the data set is biased, there's no way to fully tell when things will come out biased. You can do a lot of red teaming and all kinds of testings, but it's so complicated that these are some of the things that are concerning that stops organizations from launching these tools that are consumer facing, right? So as Jimmy mentioned, I think the first wave of these tools will be employee facing, right? To basically, have a walled garden where you can test and see. If it gives some wrong information to employees, they can sort of figure this out, but not when it's given to consumers and all kinds of chaos, happens. So another thing, I won't mention too much about it, but how do you even audit this? How do you go about keeping it regulation compliant? IP issue is a huge issue. All kinds of text to image companies like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, they're getting sued left and right, right? So this is still not solved. But the biggest problem here is there's an unintended consequence of launching these tools without knowing fully well what it will do. And a lot of this problem comes from friction between humans and AI. For example, remember that interpretable machine learning that I talked about just now to explain algorithms to humans. Turns out even these tools are not so useful when you're facing experts like doctors and lawyers, because there's things like algorithmic aversion. So then how do you deal with that? There's all technology is the first step, but integrating into the business framework is an entirely new challenge right there, right? So there's also unintended consequences of applying these tools. If you use these as a knowledge management tool, what would happen to people, talking to each other, the social connection. Professor Gore Birch and I and Zichin, we have a paper showing the impact of this on Stack Overflow. And there are many things that we can talk about later, but I'll stop it from there. One thing I wanted to share with the crowd is the following. So there's this really good blog post published a few days ago, Open Challenges in LLM Research, that I think everybody should read, as well as their surveys of large language model and challenges and applications of large language model. I'll share that in the chat, so people who want to read more about it can read.
Great.
Fantastic. I think, now is a good time to actually get into some actual detailed use cases of how AI can be used. And I want to start with Paul. I know you've got a demo that you want to do just to give people a sense for some things that are possible. Over to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Great tee-ups. I'm going to take the audience from very conceptual level, which we've been at for the last 20 or 30 minutes, to very detailed levels. I actually want to show you specific prompts actually on ChatGPT and actually answer questions and see how it goes. I'm going to be showing you ChatGPT, so that's the product from a company called AI, but other solutions exist out there, particularly Microsoft. Microsoft has something called Bing AI Chat, which is at an equivalent level, very similar. But let me share my screen and Lisa, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see
Great.
it.
So just a couple super basics, people who on terminology, so I'm gonna get very, very basic and then go up. OpenAI is the name of the company. ChatGPT is the name of the product. It's a confusing name. A prompt or prompt engineering, don't be intimidated by that. It's just what goes in the box. It's what goes in the search box equivalent. 3.5 and 4 are the version numbers of it. And at a high level, very simplistic, this was trained on all the internet data they could find, trillions of words. It was put in a base model, which is very sophisticated. And then guardrails, you may hear that term, or self-trust and safety layer. Those are additional rules were put in. When ChatGPT first came out, you could ask it how many people you kill for $1, and now you don't no longer get a thing. So that's part of the trust and safety rules, and lots of debates on where those lines are. And then the output is used either by humans through browsers and other applications. And then, so what I want to walk through is a business thing where we are fictionally at a company and we have been tasked with launching a new product. And the product is coffee cups for left-handed people. And I'm going to walk through and flip back and forth between this slide and ChatGPT and actually show you some prompts and answer questions. So I'll pause and start sending some questions in. And the headline of this is that we believe strongly that these generative AI tools can help every knowledge worker in your organization increase productivity by at least 10%. So enterprise sales reps, research scientists on Moderna, analysts at Fidelity, customer service, anybody who's dealing with the WINS digital stuff that Jimmy referred to, or use a computer, can have at least a 10% improvement. And I want to show you a couple examples, and the goal here is to get you inspired to go try some of these prompts or your own prompts with your own use cases. But let's go back to our fictional example. So we're all part of a team, and we've got to start researching. And so this is ChatGPT. People haven't seen it. 3.5 and 4. 3.5 is the free version, so I'm going to use that. You're an expert in coffee cup market research. What are the top 5 product attributes most important to left-handed coffee drinkers? So a little bit of debate back and forth on, do you have to say, are you an expert or not? Sam Altman suggested to do that. I think it depends a little bit. I tend to do it. You may want to try yourself if it's useful or not. It is in some cases or not, but we put it in, and then boom, we get an answer pretty quickly here. Now, a list in a bullet. Grip comfort, design, spill resistance. So a couple things to realize on this. One is very fast. Two, it's estimating. What it's actually doing is looking at all those trillion words out there and trying to estimate what the next word would be, given the prompt I put into the box, if you will. And we like to think of it as 1,000 interns at your fingertips. It'll bring a lot of information to you quickly, but that last mile needs to be a human for a lot of these use cases. So I may want to use this as a beginning way, but as we keep, here's good 5 attributes, and let's keep learning about our market research here. You know, we're hearing about these different types of spill-resistant cups. So this is a great way to start learning concepts quickly. So what are different types? Showing the internet, bringing it back here. It's great at starting initial market research in different areas. So here we'll create a new chat. We'll stay with 3.5. You are a market research expert, use business. What are the leading companies who sell coffee cups? And it starts creating an initial list. Now, things like Bing AI will actually go and search the internet. ChatGPT, this particular model out of the box, stops with the internet. It was only trained on the internet up through September 2021. But in a lot of industries, it's a good first start. But we can go further. Remember that these are interns, digital interns. This is your team at your side, if you will. We can ask it to even be more productive. You know, so list in a table. First column, name of company. Second column, revenues. Third column, biggest competitive differentiators. Now, this is almost something we would literally tell a summer intern or a business analyst or someone on our team. Notice I purposely made mistakes. What's magical about some of these things, it can do a great job at understanding intentionality. So it understood that I was looking for biggest differentiators. It wasn't able to find revenue from the stuff here, but you can see where it's a really good sense for keep going on and on in terms of, you know, adding information. We can add column for distribution channel. Retail, cafes, online. Let me pause for questions. If you can put questions in, and I'll keep driving.
We don't have any questions on this coming in right now, so I think you can just keep on going.
So we've done some market research. We've realized some of the key attributes. We realized some of the players here. In order to present to our boss upstairs for marketing, we need to, for budget approval, we need to start working on our business plan. So we can, you know, start a new chat. We can start 3.5, you know, you're an expert at business plans, outline a business plan for left-handed coffee cups. And as you can see, very quickly, it's a first draft. Now, this isn't the final one. We're still going to need to double check all this, but it's a fabulous way to get started. Now, it's 10 steps. We realize, you know, we probably also want to eventually create this to slides. So, you know, create slides. And it'll create the text. There's some more advanced ways you can actually create these in the PowerPoint slide, but for now, these are just what each slide would say. So slide 9, slide 10. Maybe we happen to be at a company where we know that the presentation protocol is no more than 7 slides. So reduce to 7 slides. And now we have 7 slides. So it's taken a concept here of a business plan. It showed us a first draft. We've been very quickly be able to shorten it as we needed it. These things are amazing because it's also in lots of different languages. For whatever reason, if we need to do in Spanish, I think it's 30 or 40 languages. You could rewrite in Spanish. And the transformative capability of this that's very horizontal are manyfold. Language is one of them. Applicability in a lot of different industries. Applicability in all the departments in your organization here. So we'll go back. So we've talked about a business plan. We've got our funding. Now we need to think a little more tactically about marketing. These tools are fantastic at brainstorming and marketing. It's a creative area where we thought technology could never get. Technology could never write jokes that were good enough for sitcoms. Technology could never be creative enough. But in fact, it is, because it's sucking up 1 trillion+ words in internet, kind of learning how people think, understanding intentionality from what we're putting in the prompt, and then coming up with estimating using these very sophisticated algorithms, what a response would be. Yep.
Yeah, one question came in about why did you start a new chat each time, Paul?
It's a great question. So you can stay within over on the left, these are chats, and you can see it keeps them in context. So you can go all the way back and see all the chats I've ever did here. And within a chat, it'll remember usually what's been said before as you narrow it down. Sometimes if you start within a chat and continue with that, it's just kind of narrowing the response down. When I start a new chat, it's really kind of a new area. So for the example on brainstorming, I wanted to start with kind of a no going in assumptions, if you will. So that's why we started a new chat on that.
And Lisa, if I can just jump in for a second, Paul, if you don't mind. One of the questions earlier was about skills and capabilities that would make people better. And I know we're going to get to this question in a minute, but this is a perfect place to just highlight one thing, which is this term that's out there called prompt engineering. So it refers to just the skill with which people write what's in the box as Paul writes it. And what can be discovered is the more the better one gets, the more specific one gets, the more one experiments, the more one learns how the model they're working with responds to what you say to it. It's just like talking to a person, right? Some people are very skilled communicators and they're able to get the most out of the people they're talking to. And other people are less skilled communicators and it stumbles and fumbles. So one of the important skills in all of this that Paul is illustrating here is you learn over time overall, and then with specific models, how to be excellent at what's called prompt engineering, which sounds really sophisticated, but it really just means how do you talk to the model to get out of it what you want.
Just to add to a bit of that there, the ChatGPT and these models are what's called decoder only models. So it just works by predicting the next tokens. And so what that means for getting good results out of these models are you want the model to actually reason things out before answering, instead of the other way around, answer and then give me a reason. You want to actually make it think step by step. So some of the survey question has some of these advanced techniques like chain of thought, tree of thought, now graph of thought, a bunch of different things. Another helpful things in prompt engineering is to actually ask the model to self-reflect. And by doing that, it just also increases the performance very much.
Can you describe, oh, sorry, Lisa, I'm going to jump in, but it's not immediately intuitive what it means to ask the model to self-reflect. So before we go on, I thought maybe you can describe what that is, because it is a fascinating thing to ask to do with generative AI.
Yeah, the very basic thing is just like, if it answers something, right, and then it gives you a wrong answer, just simply asking, is that the right answer? Can you think about it? And sometimes it gets things right. So, and then there are a bunch of other techniques, but well, I can also share these surveys that I shared on the chat. It includes it's just happening. New things are coming up literally every single day. So I think, but there are a set of things that you can.
You know, something that somebody has asked in the Q&A is, how do you know if the information that you're getting back from ChatGPT is correct? And, you know, one thing you can do is have it self-reflect, but I guess it could self-reflect and hallucinate, I assume. So any tips or ideas for, you know, sort of ascertaining that?
Yeah, Lisa, that comes up a lot. One kind of visual image I'd like to have people think about is the last 30 years of computer science is half the opportunity set. So that's been structured data. I asked for a needle in a haystack. I want to know what 2 + 2, and the answer is 4. What this generative is doing is allowing a whole new set of operating stuff. So if you really need to find the capital of Kansas, that is actually solved pretty well on Google search and others. But if you want to come up with 10 taglines, if you want to come up with rewriting a press release in the style of New York Times, if you want something that's got some creativity, these are great tools for that. Second, if you want some cognitive ability, critique the investment thesis for this fund. Give me all the pros and cons for moving my factory from Arizona to Mexico. Tell me the 5 ways that someone's going to fail in a job. So this is up another level of, and it's not precision, but it's coming back and looking at those trillion words and coming back with insights that actually take us to a whole new level of space. So I think hallucinations are great, but I think the opportunity is let's get those minimal but the opportunity to get this 10% productivity enhancement from all of our knowledge workers is around this second massive opportunity space I'm arguing for.
I was going to say, just, to take this out of the business realm for a minute, and people will either think I'm a clever parent or a terrible parent, but I went on vacation with my 7-year-old for a week and I didn't take any books. At the end of the day, every day, we sat down with ChatGPT and she constructed a story. And she just wrote it. Please write a story about Bella the dog running through a field, chasing a red ball, who meets a friend named Lily, and talk about what they did in the afternoon. And then I would add in and write it so that a 7-year-old can read it. And boom, 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 and make it get 250 words. And boom, we got a 250-page story, and she had to read it. And then we wrote, what are 3 questions that a 7-year-old could answer about the story to test and make sure she's remembering? And then she got the questions, she had to answer them. So lots of people are using this. This gets to the point of how do you use it? You can be very creative in how you use it to craft activities in the home, to think about creative things at work, to do all kinds of things in your life that are incredibly valuable. Now I'm going to get flooded with things in the chat that I'm a terrible parent because I'm not using books, but that's okay.
TK, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So hallucination is, as I mentioned, one of the biggest issue. It's really for complex models like ChatGPT and other even open source models like Llama 2 and things like that. It's really hard. I shared the GitHub repository of all the. It's a very good collection of things, so you can read that. But the current sort of ways that the organizations deal with this is having a separate tool like a knowledge database, right? And all the logics and information retrieval happens in a traditional information retrieval database system, and then just using the LLMs as an interface to interface with the humans. And a lot of the information retrieval sort of knowledge management tools out there, it works with this thing where there's a traditional information retrieval system, and then all kinds of guardrails and fact checking happening between this traditional database and LLM. That just works as an interface, as like a chat. So that's current ways to get around this statistical hallucination problem, which is not solved yet.
Yeah. Great. Thank you both. Paul, I guess, we can see you are creating another prompt there. Anything else you wanted to share with us on the demo?
Yeah, I mean, I can keep going further here. Let me just, maybe 2 more minutes. I want to show 2 or 3 other things, particularly on the cognitive thing. And one I did want to show up on the hallucination part. One, we talked about earlier, it's probability. Second, these models are designed to be creative. There's something called temperature and a few other throttles. So one way you can test that is to go through and ask it the exact same question. What is name something beautiful, and ask it 10 times, and you'll start getting different answers here. So the precision that we're used to for the last 30 years and many of our tools that we demand is different here. We're going to get closer. But let me just show 1 or 2 more. This is the creativity piece, named 7 lines for a coffee cup. This is something companies say they may spend $2,000 to $4,000 worth of agency for. And we asked for 7. We could let's ask for more than that. Let's say this is one way to edit. You can go back up here and let's say we actually want to have 20. Thousand interns bringing us lots of different value very quickly to start brainstorming. And we can do that in different languages and everything else here. Last thing I'll show, just to show one more thing is you can do mock sales calls. You can actually have it interview you back and forth. I believe all these are actual prompts that you can cut and paste. And I think the slides will be shared. One of the things we encourage companies to do is develop their own prompts for their company. So you got to create your own learning organization that intersects with these capabilities and your language and what works well. So starting to share is a great way in the company. You know, another thing, this is creating for people on the business side, you know, SWOT analysis. Create a SWOT analysis for plastic and metals cup market. Afterwards, add analysis using Michael Porter's 5 forces. So this is something a first-year MBA student might want to do. And boom, we're already looking at, again, 1,000 interns view on what strengths and weaknesses are for that. And in the Michael's 5 forces model, the 5 different forces here. So hopefully this is encouraging you to think through and motivating you to go try it yourself, motivating for you to find someone else to learn with, and start to get a taste for the unbelievable cognitive and productive capabilities of these tools.
You know, there's a question that came in, and you know, I'd pose this to any of you around bias. So, so Danielle writes, with regard to writing a story in ChatGPT, I've demoed this myself and was disappointed in the outcome, and that bias and diversity, et cetera, was not reflected.
Yep.
How can we be sure that the output from AI is not filled with bias and reflects the diverse society we live in? Thoughts on these, on the biases that you know seem to be inherent sometimes in AI. Go ahead.
So I was going to say the short answer is you can't, right? Not right now. You have to design it into your prompts. Bloomberg did a big study on this, and the problem is it's based on the models that are underlying it, and the underlying models have the bias that they have when they're created. So it's an amazingly good question, and one of the things that the entire generative AI community is working on is to ensure that as generative AI moves forward, it doesn't simply perpetuate the historical biases, because as DK pointed out, they're just big pattern recognition tools. They look at what happened in the past, they see how people responded to what happened in the past, and then it's kind of a big fill in the blank model, right? And so if the history was biased, this will be biased, there's no question, and it's a big problem. And there are other problems. I think the important thing to remember is, first of all, it happens and we have to protect against it. 2, the way you prompt engineer, you can design your specific prompts to engineer it out, but the model itself, left to its own devices, may not necessarily. And the third thing I always like to point out, and it's not an excuse, it's just where we are. We're, to use a baseball analogy, I apologize, it's very American, but we're in like the first pitch of the first batter of the top half of the first inning, which for anybody who doesn't follow baseball, it means we're at the very, very, very beginning of the very, very, very beginning. Because prior to November, we wouldn't have even thought about having this discussion. And I think people are intensely aware of the problem and are working on its solution. But it's a great question.
Go ahead,
Great.
DK.
Go ahead.
If I may, I just want one quick thing is, I hear these questions a lot. I encourage one way. What would you do if your intern did that? You would ask your intern to go rewrite the article. So go ask ChatGPT to rewrite the article, or take 4 articles you think there are no bias in there, put that into the box or the prompt, and then have it rewrite your article using the same style as above here. So there's actually ways to hop back and forth conversationally to get to a on this, rather than giving up and saying this tool is not useful.
Which gets to DK's point on self-reflection. Get it to self-reflect, and that's another good example of that.
Right.
Yeah, so just to get shed light on, this is super important issue. So even with the very basic sort of word embedding, that's, you know, all of these are built based on, there is a huge bias because of the data it's trained on, right? And with the ChatGPT, there is a layer where a bunch of humans are just providing what's a good answer, right? And these kinds of answers are preferable, and that's basically building in more bias. So there have been actually lots of papers showing this, that Google DeepMind has a paper, OpenAI has a paper, a bunch of academics has paper. So long answer short, you can actually fine tune and teach the language model if your organization's goal is to come up with very unbiased and non-problematic language model. That is pretty hard problem, because you would need to spend a lot of resources and red teaming, in fact, checking all kinds of several biases that these tools reflect. Yeah.
Thank you for that. DK, I'd like to turn to what's next. And I know there are a bunch of questions in the chat, and we are going to reserve some time at the end to get back to some of these. But DK, can you talk a little bit about sort of, what's the next level of this? Where is it heading? And sort of what is your research showing about this?
Yes, so I would like to share a research paper that I've been working on with my student and a co-author. All right, so first thing, I wanted to show this super nice tree of language models. So you can start, you can see Word2Vec 2013 from Google. This started all, and you see all kinds of different types of models. And we're here, and this is just family of slew of language models based on what's called decoder-only model. This is basically trying to predict the next token given contextual data. So what it does is it looks at the internet data and learns the statistical regularity such that when you ask something, it has a semblance of knowledge, right? And this is the paper if you want to see more about it. But one thing that I wanted to point out here is the generative AI's powerful capability beyond the ChatGPT and these generating images and text and so on and so forth. This paper, so here's a summary. So generative AI, because it's modeling data generating process, it is able to learn to generate any complex object, multimodal objects like images, documents, patents, jobs, firms, portfolio, consumers. In fact, digital twin of anything that you have a good data on, right? And in doing so, here's the more powerful part. It learns the object space and compositions in scale, right? So that now the trained model can then map out the object space and provide deeper insights, compare, contrast, and augment purposeful synthesis of new and creative object, right? So object here could be anything that I just mentioned there, and do 1 and 2 at an incredible speed and scale, right? So I'll briefly talk about an example, Innovate, generative AI for patents, innovation, and firms. You can find a paper here, tiny.cc/innovate. And this is a paper with my students, Aochi Chang and the co-author Sunny Tambe. So this, the contribution of this paper is that it can map patent text, like the claims, into an interpretable spatial representation of firm innovation activities. So this is just a 2D example. And what this model is doing is now it's developing this space of objects, in this case, patent and firms that own it. And this is not possible with other visualization and mapping like PCA, TISNI, topic models, traditional autoencoders, because these lack interpretability and orthogonality constraints. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can read the paper about it. But what this enables us to do is the following. So you can actually ask this model, what could you get if you combine patent A and B and automate combinational creativity, right? So you can actually let the model generate thousands of things and then use humans to filter. Oh, yeah, this is a good idea. That's a bad idea, right? How unusual is a patent with respect to specific technological factor? Technological factors will be driven out by the algorithm by looking at the claims text. You can also ask, like, what innovation factors increase or decrease over time. You can actually ask the model to rank companies in technological factor X, right? If I'm firm A, what innovation do I need to boost it up to be more like firm B, right? how do firms move in innovation space over time, and how does this correlate with some performance? Imagine you're a company and you're trying to do a strategic positioning, and you want to figure out what the other competitors are doing. You can use this tool to map out what other companies are doing and figure out and what happens to innovation activity in specific technological region after event X, where X could be acquisition mergers. Is killer acquisition actually happening, and things like that. So here is just like some example. The innovation factor here is actually driven out and figured out by the algorithm. And for example, it extracts out electric digital data processing, and it is able to rank firms. Yeah, look, Western Digital Corp is ranking 1 in this sort of innovation factor based on patent claims data. If you're, say, Google or Apple, and they want to enter into a healthcare market, we know Apple wants to, then you can sort of see, well, okay, there are other incumbent firms like Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, and whatnot. What is our technological prowess difference? And can we tell it based on looking at the patents data? Right? You can use this tool to do that, and it just tells you that Google and Medtronic has this difference, like diagnostic surgery, measuring electric magnetic variable, things like this. It all comes down to this. Why, bottom line, you can use these techniques on all kinds of multimodal business objects. You can imagine using the same technique and map products and feature space using customer reviews, or products in which feature space using customer feedback and complaints, or brands and personality space using social media data, or assets in risk space using 10K earnings report, analyst report, or jobs and skill space using job description data. You can see how jobs are evolving over time and what kind of skills are needed going forward. You can sort of try to predict that. Or firms in business strategy space using PitchBook on 10K or Crunchbase profile data. So bottom line, the powerful ability of generative AI is by trying to create the multimodal object, it tries to understand the landscape that these multimodal object lies in. And as a business, you can poke and prod and then do combinational creativity. So that's, I think, the real sort of the next level sort of strategic benefit that this generative AI brings in.
That's super interesting, and it really impacts the field of strategy quite a bit when you start to think of it in those terms. So so thank you for sharing that. A lot of people are asking questions around getting started, and Jimmy, can you talk a little bit about what do you recommend to businesses that, know they need to be, they're in the crucible space, they know they need to be there. You talked a little bit earlier about a walled garden, but can you talk about how to actually deploy those pilots, and what do businesses need to put together in order to get this done?
Sure. So I think the way I would think about this, and I would tie it back, if I can, Lisa, to the question of capabilities and expand that. So we had talked earlier about, and somebody had asked the question in the chat about, how do we think about differences in capability at the individual level? And when Paul was giving this example, we were talking about the importance of prompt engineering, and that clearly from that, or hopefully from that, what became clear was that there will be, enormous differences in how people build their own capabilities to use this as a business tool, just like a spreadsheet or a computer or a carpenter's tools. We all know that get each of those tools in the hands of different people, they are able to use them better or worse. But let's take that up from the level of the individual to the level of the company. And there's two things I want to say before we talk about how companies get started, because it really points to a direction of how they do it. One is, let's go back a number of years to Lean, which was just another business concept or business tool, if you will. And Toyota innovated that. They called it the Toyota Way. They kept their doors open, and anybody who wanted to take a tour could see how they used it. And things have changed since then with the advent of electric vehicles and whatnot. But in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, Toyota had a higher market cap than all of the three major US vehicle companies combined. Even though all of them could walk through, see what Toyota did, see how they did it, they just couldn't apply it in the same way. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from both what we talked about at the individual level and what we see at the company level, which is that some people apply business tools and capabilities and concepts much better than others. So that's one thing I think we have to keep in mind. So this is going to be something incredibly important to get very, very good at applying. I mean, we see it with internet and e-commerce in the retail sector, that not only the difference between digital native companies and those that are more traditional, but even more traditional companies that applied e-commerce into their business model. Some of them are very good at it and we love shopping there, and some of them aren't very good at it, and ultimately we don't enjoy going there online and they wither. So what does that mean for this? I think it means two things, Lisa. First, you need to think about what business you're in and how are you going to use it to compete, because otherwise you don't know where to use it. So in business, if we're going to oversimplify this, on the one end are commodity companies, on the other end are luxury companies, and then you have other companies in the middle. Everybody's striving for a better customer experience, for improved value proposition, and ultimately for profitable growth. If you're a commodity company, it's all about cost, right? Because you're delivering iron ore, you're delivering steel, you're delivering copper, whatever you're delivering, it's a commodity. If you're a luxury company, you're delivering a Tiffany's ring, you're delivering an Hermès tie, whatever. It's the product, it's the experience. If you're Ritz-Carlton, whatever. And many companies are in the middle. So the first thing we'd say is think very, very hard about who you are, what you stand for in the market, and what processes in your company drive that performance, and then focus on improving that capability. So if you're a commodities company, where are the places that you can apply generative AI into wins work to drive down cost? So if you're an exploration and production part of the oil company, using generative AI to improve the process of finding and exploiting reserves of natural resources, right? That is where a tremendous amount of time and money is spent and where costs can be saved. So you can really make an improvement, right? But there's no customer experience in crude oil, right? It's all cost. But if you're Hermès, you can do anything from really improve the way you produce products to changing the way customers try on and see, different accessories or clothing. We're getting to the point now where companies are literally testing models where you can scan your body, right? And then you can scan your closet. And then they can start suggesting, oh, I see you have this. Well, we have these things to go with that. Why don't we show you what they'll look like on your body? And that's a really amazing experience that they can give to you that an oil company doesn't need. With all that said, start by going through the tasks, functions, and processes, finding the places it matters. And by the way, I don't want to leave out SG&A, all of the basic functions, legal, compliance, accounting, FP&A, press releases, those are no-brainers. Those are all wins work. They can all be taken through some kind of generative AI process. And by the way, your colleagues will thank you, because nobody likes writing their 1,000th press release, which takes them 10 hours and it's kind of dull, if ChatGPT can take 9 hours out of it. And nobody likes reconciling the books yet again when ChatGPT or some other kind of AI plugin can take hours and hours out of it. So not only is it good, but everybody's going to love you for it. But go through, find the places, run those controlled experiments, but then really importantly, number 2, set up the training program for the whole company, because a well-trained group of professionals will find within their areas of work the best places to apply it. So experiments, ensure everybody, quote unquote, knows how to swim, because remember, it's like swimming. And third, very intentionally go top to bottom through the company and think about the future of where the industry is going. When e-commerce came out, it was impossible for Barnes & Noble to imagine Amazon. It was impossible for Hyatt to imagine Airbnb. Okay, we get it. People made a mistake. But remember, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We've seen this movie before. We now know how disruptive these technologies can be. So we really have to start thinking very, very hard. Wait a minute. This can shake up my whole industry and my whole company. If somebody came in with a clean sheet of paper, what's this going to look like? What's the Amazon equivalent from books to generative AI in my industry today, and get there before anybody else, or they're going to get there first? So those are the 3 things. Experiments, teach everybody because they're going to give you the best ideas, and a very intentional redesign of the industry.
We've been talking a lot about industry disruption and strategy, but what about talent development? And there've been a few questions about this. And when I say talent development, I mean less about how do people develop the talents to use this, and more, what are the implications for talent development? We talked about, Paul talked about 1,000 interns. When we think about more junior staff and the work that is typically done by junior staff that may be, replaced by ChatGPT, how do companies think about educating the next generation of their workforce, particularly when it comes to knowledge work? And I'll just open that up to Paul. Do you look like you have a
couple thoughts?
thought on
I would
that?
first start off that, we often say AI is not going to take your job. It's someone who knows how to use AI. So I think that human plus AI is the right model that we're seeing out there. I think second, to reinforce what Jimmy's saying, we've got organizations without clear employee use guidelines are stunting their enthusiasts. So figure out, public information only, ChatGPT, or only use Bing or whatever it is, but get a safe lane or safe thing. I think for talent stuff here, jobs will change. Spending $100 for a blog post for a website, which we know companies doing it, that is gone and it's never coming back. So there is a horsewhip analogy on how you think about jobs that go away, and that will change your organization here. So I think thinking through which ones are changing quicker and which ones won't, and getting them redefined is a really important part of the organizational design element. For instance, it has fundamentally changed in Hollywood now how to do commercials. You can now have a almost near Super Bowl quality commercial that's generated by Gen AI for less than $10,000 to $15,000 in a couple of weeks. Something that would take you $50,000 or $80,000 just 12 months ago. So that's not going in. So finding out which of those job roles and functions are going to be radically changed, and actually leaning into that is one critical part we see of the HR model.
Got it. Okay. Lillian has asked about building your own models and the cost of building your own models. And this kind of goes to the build versus buy question for companies as they look at this. How should companies think about, and how should leaders think about how to invest in AI, Gen AI?
These days, what's called foundational models, I don't think companies should start doing that, because that's incredibly hard, and the training cost related to it is, so foundational model, as I mentioned before, is about just training these large models, imbuing it with the generic sort of knowledge from large set of data online, right? So then you would have to actually instruct, tune it, and then add human sort of preference to this, and that's very expensive. But what's good about these days is that starting March of this year, I don't know if people have read this sort of quote unquote leaked internal document from Google employees saying OpenAI and Google doesn't have a moat because open source community is just really fast. And so I think it is definitely quite cheap actually to use these open source models like Llama 2, which is now they let you do commercial stuff unless you're Facebook's competitor, Meta's competitor. They have some guideline. It's available for free and commercial use, like Llama 2, right? So you can take these kind of models, or you just go to Hugging Face, which they have all these collections of open source LLMs, and then make sure, define what your organizational goal is. And you can either, train it using, I think prompting you need to do more than that if you want to do actual, have a moat, build a moat, and you need to sort of fine tune it with your own data set, your know-how, regulatory, knowledge injection and things like that. But open source is just developing so quickly that this is getting cheaper and cheaper to do. Now, based on a technique called LoRa, you can actually fine tune large language models too with the personal computers. So the cost is not a big issue. The cost is actually getting humans' preference and making sure that the model is not doing outputting biased result, hallucinating result, that's very hard problem that even the big companies cannot yet solve.
And quickly, just a clarification, I know some people have been concerned about using open source models and sharing potentially proprietary information with them. Is that a cause of concern, and how do you address that concern about open source models?
No, so open source model, it's once trained, you can actually have your own internal cluster server where it, like, whatever your employees and consumer put in never goes outside of the organization. But you have to be careful about the licenses, right? Some of these models don't allow you to do commercial development. A lot of these do, like Llama 2 and other stuff. So that's, I think there's no concern if you're using open source models that are basically, you just make sure the licenses are good, then everything could just live internally in your own server. So you don't have to worry about it.
That's helpful.
Lisa, if I may,
Yeah.
I just want to simplify this even a little more for some of the maybe non-technical. I think one thing, we don't know exactly, but OpenAI probably spent tens of millions sucking up trillions of information, training their model, and then making it public. So that's a kind of proprietary model that we've all I demoed, and what DK was talking about was something called an open source model, where you can go get an already trained, they're called foundation model, for free, that's nearly 70, 80, 90%, and put it inside your organization and have your own chat GPT with inside. So this amazing capability of these open source that allowed companies, so you don't want to do your own foundational model, but you may want to have your own do-it-yourself chat GPT for your employees if you don't want to have your data ever leave your organization.
Great. All right, I'm watching the time. We only have about 8 more minutes. And I think, the logical question for business leaders who are thinking about the implications of all of this, if it's getting so easy, how do I derive that competitive advantage? And, we've talked a lot about, as one of the participants wrote in, we've talked a lot about cutting costs, but how do you derive new revenue streams? So I'm going to kind of combine those into one question. And Jimmy, I wonder if you could address the question around, actually creating value and finding that more sustainable competitive advantage in this world where these have become so easy to use and adopt.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to reverse them, because then we have to talk about, you can build your sustainable advantage in revenue and cost. So, there are lots of examples of finding revenue, and it is easy to think about cost, but just a couple of them that are out there and we can generalize. So Flawless AI has figured out how to dub movies almost instantly into all languages at almost zero cost, right? So the problem with movie dubbing is that, the lips don't match the language, the voice quality isn't native to the speaker. It's just a terrible user experience. And by the way, it's incredibly expensive to do and takes a long time. As a result, movies are dubbed into very few languages. Thanks, Paul. And by the way, go to their landing page, watch the video. They show you do it, both taking out, inappropriate words, as well as dubbing into Spanish and Japanese, and it is awesome. So what does that do to the industry? It means that instead of having a potential revenue source of X, because only a few movies can be dubbed into a few languages, all of a sudden, every movie can be dubbed into every major language. And the revenue opportunity for the movie industry goes way, way up, which means all of a sudden first of all, revenue opportunity, and they can make a lot more, hopefully better movies, because the economics are shifting, right? So what that points us to is to say, okay, what in my process is a bottleneck to expanding revenue, where the improvement in the process through the application of Gen AI to the wins part of the work will actually improve my opportunity. So what's another one? You have a field sales force and they have a manual this big on what's going on with the product and what to do. You can create a better customer experience and more upselling opportunities, because to DK's point, you've built an LLM for your company based on all of the information and all of your PDFs and all of your sales and service manuals, so that they get to a customer site, the customer tells them the issues, they quickly type, or better yet, talk into the model what the issue is and the opportunity, and instantly the best answer comes up, and they're able to give this customer the best opportunity and the best upsell possibility. another example. And the list continues. So on the revenue side, the reason we're pointing to these is there are many, many opportunities without even thinking about all the new products and services to improve existing products and services, to sell more, expand markets, sell better, improve customer service. So with all that, Lisa, how do you build a competitive advantage? If what we've said is ultimately at the core, everybody's going to have access to all of these, and these are ultimately business tools. Well, we've, again, seen this movie before. The internet is available to everyone, and yet some people have figured out better strategies and then better execution, right? So ultimately, not to oversimplify, it comes down to those two elements. So first, it's very, very important to be able to step back and say, what is the core of my value proposition, and what is the core of driving profitable growth, which incorporates both, obviously, pricing, volume, and cost? And what would the applications be of this that would most effectively and differentially, right, so that I could differentiate myself, do this? So it's not enough to say, oh, I need a website to sell, more stuff. Then it's all about how is the customer experience molded? This is going to affect colleagues, right? It's going to affect processes. It's going to affect customers. It's going to affect vendors. So it's, again, thinking about it from where do I apply it in a way that's critical to differentiation, and then execution, which is about ensuring your organization is highly skilled and you're thinking about it at the integration of technology and business application.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think I know we haven't gotten to all of the questions, but we are just about out of time. And before we close, I did just want to let everybody know that there is a conference coming up in September 12th and 13th, called GAI World, and it's being presented by our partners here at GAI Insights, and BU Questrom is a partner in this conference as well. And it will basically be a boot camp for sharing real enterprise Gen AI use cases. So it's in Boston at the Royal Sonesta Hotel. Again, the dates are September 12th and 13th. You'll each be receiving an invite email with a discount code. So I hope you'll consider joining us. I want to thank all of our panelists once again, DK Lee, Jimmy Hexter, and Paul Baier, for the fascinating conversation. Obviously, we could go on for another hour, I'm sure. And thank you to all of the attendees for the great questions. And we hope to continue to engage in this conversation with you all going forward. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.